many people base their new life on the life they don't want. Well, when you're focused on what you don't want, guess what you run right into every single time? You run right back into that life because that's your focus. Whatever your focus becomes your reality. When people start thinking about real estate and they get so caught up in real estate, I think that's very short-sighted. It's the business running inside of that real estate. And the business is policies, procedures, structure, checklists, however you want to run it. But it is not made up of you.
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here and in Quebec. And today I am pleased and honored to have someone that I look up to a lot, Steve Rozenberg. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, look, Steve, I'm going to jump right into it. I've been following the Bigger Pockets community. It's a place where I've spent hundreds of hours listening to podcasts, watching videos, and so on. And you are very present. You've contributed a lot. And your story is actually inspiring. As a pilot, you big day in your life, changed something, September 11th, and you had to look for other ways to build something for yourself, to build a company, and you've been extremely successful at it. And so today I'm hoping to take a little bit of time with you to inspire others, number one, but also to get into like the nitty gritty sometimes of like, how have you been able to start from scratch and build a company where they're owning and managing like over 1,000 properties in the Southern US?
That's a good question. And, you know, it's kind of like an onion, right? There's a lot of layers to that question that you asked.
Yeah.
You know, the reason I got into real estate is because I had a safe, secure job as an airline pilot. As you said, 9/11 changed that. And it made me realize the day that I got my furlough notice from the airlines, which was 48 hours after the towers fell, that my safe, secure job was not safe and it was not secure. And I didn't know anything about real estate. All I ever wanted to do as a little kid growing up was fly airplanes. And, you know, that came very abruptly to a pause after 9/11. And I just had to figure something out. So it wasn't like, hey, this would be a cool idea to do this. This was if I don't figure this out, I'm not going to be able to feed my family conversation, you know? And so I went down the path of just seeing what do people do that are what do people do that make money? And everything at one point, I looked at people that were wealthy and they were all tied back to real estate. So I thought, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. I've always heard of people making money in real estate. So I focused on two things. The first thing I focused on was learning as much as I could about the world of real estate. So I read a book a week on real estate. Again, this is 2002. So there was no YouTube or Facebook or anything, not to date myself, but I had to go to the library, get a library card, and I had to rent books, and that's all I could do. And I was just renting a book every week. And I learned an extensive amount about real estate. I got a coach and a mentor. I learned how to flip properties through this coach. And then I started just kind of steamrolling that. And like everybody, I mean, I got lied to, ripped off, stolen from, I got punched in the face, knocked down on the ground. I didn't have a choice, right? I had to keep getting up because I did not know what else I was going to do. So I just kept getting up. And then slowly I stopped failing less and less. And it's like, and all of a sudden the tables just like started turning a little bit, started getting a little bit more success, started getting better at the things I was good at, started realizing what I was not good at. And then I just started evolving as an investor, owning houses and apartment complexes and all that. And then that parlayed into my business partner and I starting a management company to manage our assets because, as I said, I made a lot of mistakes early on. Some of those mistakes were buying the wrong properties that nobody wanted to manage, and we had to figure out a solution. So, it definitely was not roses and sunshine. It was not this social media life. It was down and dirty in the ghettos of Houston, trying to figure out how to make this model work. which we eventually made it work by selling a lot of them. But it was a very, I will say that those failures that I had were some of the biggest lessons in my life that made me have the knowledge to grow, scale a business. And eventually I sold my business. But it's because of my failures. And I mean, it's those humble moments of sitting by yourself at nighttime thinking, what the hell am I doing? Like, I don't even know if I'm doing the right thing, wrong thing. How am I going to pay the bills? Those moments of clarity of actually pushing through to the other side is what actually got me to be successful.
Yeah. And some of those moments, as you said, can be absolutely crushing. And we all have some of those experiences where it's on the weekend, you're by yourself, it's late at night, you don't know how you're going to do it, but you know you have to figure it out. And this is where the mindset is so key. And I know I've gone through this so many times, kind of, well, like you, but different. I left a more comfortable corporate job just because I was tired of always working for other people and feel like I had more to give, more to do for my family. And that's when our first child was born and wanted to spend more time at home and have that availability. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy. And as you said, like people look at it afterwards and they're like, oh, your life is great. It seems like you've been successful all the time. It's far from the truth. And I was hoping like you could maybe share with us like a moment or two of like when you're down at the bottom and in your head, you keep going. You are not going to let it go because that's who we are and we're machines. And so what was it like for you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I will say for those of you watching, whether you knew or experienced, we've all been there. And if you have not been, you will be there. And if you never get there, then I would say you're not trying hard enough, because if you are not failing, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. I mean, that's the reality, right? You don't learn to ride a bike by jumping on and being this expert bike rider, right? You're going to fall over. Same thing in anything that you do, learning a language, doing a new industry. I will say one of the biggest challenges is a lot of people, and I was this to a degree, and maybe you were as well, that we run away from a life that we don't want. So for example, when we were talking, you said like, I didn't want that 9 to 5. I didn't want the control. And you said a couple other things. Many people base their new life on the life they don't want. Well, when you're focused on what you don't want, guess what you run right into every single time? You run right back into that life because that's your focus. Whatever your focus becomes your reality. So, and I coach a lot of people. I coach businesses and I coach investors. And I'll ask them, what do you want? Like, why are you doing this? And they'll go through this whole story of all the things they don't want. They don't want to be controlled. They don't want a 9 to 5. They don't. And I'll listen to them. And then my next question is let's try this over again. My question was, what do you want? And they'll think about it and like, you know what? I don't know. And so what happens is it's like, imagine this, right? When you get in your car and you're going to a destination, you probably have a place you're going to go to, maybe even a strategy, meaning a map of how you're going to get there, and probably a time that you want to arrive at this destination, right? That's what we do, whether it's the movies, dinner, whatever it is. So imagine if you just get in the car, load up the family, and you just start driving. At some point, someone's going to go, where the hell are we going? And you're like, I don't know. I'm just driving because I don't want to be home. So many times when they get into real estate or they get into a business, they get in their car, so to speak, and they drive. They don't know where they're going. They don't have a destination and they don't have a time of when they're going to arrive there. So many people, especially in real estate, they're buying houses, they're flipping, they're doing all these things, but they don't actually know why they're doing it. They don't have an end destination that's quantifiable with a date and a dollar amount to actually say, I've made it here. So what do? They're just driving down the highway and they don't even know if they're going the right way or the wrong way. Because as you know, and many people watching, when you decided to leave the corporate world, nobody gave you a manual and said, hey, here is how you are going to live your life now. And this is what you do right. On page 93, that's what you don't do. That's wrong, right? No, we don't get those manuals in life. So that means that we have to figure it out. And we figure it out by making wrong turns, making mistakes, or getting a coach or a mentor to help us guide and sidestep those pitfalls. And so one of the biggest challenges is when you do hit that pitfall or that roadblock or those sleepless nights. And again, if you haven't gotten them, you will. And if you haven't and never will, then I would say you didn't reach your potential. But let's just say we all get there and we're humble enough and we can set our ego and our pride aside to say, okay, yeah, I've been there. Well, your destination, your why, that is what keeps you going. That's what makes you get up the next morning and go, you know what? I'm going to hit it again. And I'm going to hit it again. And I'm going to keep hitting it. But if you don't have that reason for doing it, it's like a car driving down the road or a plane flying in the sky. Eventually, it will run out of gas and it will crash. Same thing what happens to people in real estate. They run out of gas and they go, oh, real estate sucks. It's like real estate is a tool. So, you know, one thing I think it's important, my perception or my opinion, I'll say, when it comes to real estate, and look, I love real estate. I think real estate has given me an amazing life, but it's four walls and a roof. That's all it is. It's an inanimate object. I know many people, and I was one of them, that I bought four walls and a roof, and I lost money on those deals. I could not figure out how to make that property make money. Well, I sell this property to another guy. I actually had to come to closing with money because he wanted it at such a good deal. I was happy to pay that amount, right? I was the happiest person because it was no longer my problem. He was a happy person because he was getting a great deal. But what was interesting is I knew this guy and we were friends, and he took that house and he started making money with it almost immediately. And I'm thinking, what the hell, man? I had this property for 5 years. I could not make money. And he said to me, he said, Steve, you had the wrong business model with this property. You were trying to run it this way. Wrong business model. Run it this way. So when people start thinking about real estate and they get so caught up in real estate, I think that's very short-sighted. It's the business running inside of that real estate. And the business is policies, procedures, structure, checklists, however you want to run it. But it is not made up of you. So I think I don't know, that was a long answer, but I don't know if that answered your original question.
It does. And it's actually like a perfect springboard, because given your background in the airline, you were used to a lot of structure and checklist and verifying and double checking and so on. And so for someone who's starting and has got like, you know, a dozen properties, sometimes it's easy to just like, oh, I'll run it by myself and I'll do it on the weekend and I'll do here and there. But no, you've started a business. You need to treat it and run it like a business. And so my question to you then is like, as people scale and grow, what would be like the first 3 to 5 things that you consider absolutely primordial, like primary objectives that they set up, even if they think it's not necessary given their scale?
That's a really, really good question. And by the way, I still am an airline pilot. I actually still fly for the air. I fly a 777 aircraft. Yeah. Okay. But so going back to your question, and again, I think that's a very good question, because this is how you start getting out of self-employed to business ownership, right? And so let me just, I think it's important to understand definitions, because a lot of people don't understand definitions. And that's when things go off the rails. So to me, and I was taught by my coach, the definition of a business is a commercial, profitable enterprise that runs without you, and it has a sale date. So if we break that down, a commercial, profitable enterprise, that's a business that makes money. Very simple.
Yeah.
Running without you is what we're going to talk about right now. This is the system and admin of your business. And having a sale date, I'll explain in a second. So we understand how a business makes money, right? You've got to basically have more income than expenses. Very simple, right? Mm-hmm. It's got to be documented. It's got to be metriced, right? So a business is all about data and numbers. And if you are not focusing on sales and marketing of your business, you're going out of business. You just don't realize it yet. Now, if you may say, I only have 12 properties, I don't need to do that, I would say you're wrong, because you should be trying to grow your business. And by growing your business is sales and marketing. But going back to your original question, the way that you're able to scale your business and have it run without you. If I were to, let's say, this imaginary person that has 12 properties, my question to them is could you walk away from your properties for 3 weeks or 3 months and them operate automatically, systematically, without your involvement, and you come back and the business be the same size or bigger than the day that you left it? Now, if the answer is no, then you do not own a business. By definition, you have a job, and it's probably a much lower paying job than you worked at and wherever it is you did. Okay. So how do you systematize? Now, the biggest challenge when it comes to business owners or people who own rental properties and they don't think of themselves as business owners is they don't understand that they're running a business. But let's think about this. you've got rules, you've got federal laws, regulations, you have income, you have expenses, you have profit, you have loss. Just by that definition alone, you are running a business. The one person who does not have a business mindset is the one who's actually owning the business. So if you were a bank and someone came to you and said, hey, I've never done this before, but I think I'm going to start this kind of thing and I'm going to wing it and I'm going to go off my gut. I've got an uncle who did it. He's going to help me out. I don't have a business plan. I don't have anything. I'm just going to give it a shot. Can you loan me some money? If I was the bank, I'd be like, are you effing kidding me? Like, get out of my office. But yet, this is how many people run their business of being a landlord. They don't have a business plan. They don't have a structure. They don't have an end date. They've got life they don't want, right? I don't want a 9 to 5. Well, that's stupid. Go live on the beach in a tent and you'll be fine, right? So where I'm going with this is that when you think of the systems, you've got to figure out what is a high income activity that I should be doing and what are low income, low priority tasks that I should not be doing. Okay. Every business in general has anywhere between 8 to 11 systems, right? Getting a new tenant, having a maintenance ticket, dealing with an eviction. These are all called systems, right? And there's a flow to that system. Every system has a flow. The problem is if it's in your head and you get hit by a truck tomorrow, how do I run your business? I can't. It's got to be documented. It's got to be procedural driven. I should be able to walk into your business tomorrow, sit down, open up a systems manual, read it, and do the job. And the way you can verify I did it is by a checklist being checked off and KPI metrics that metric it. So for every system, you have to have a system flow, which is basically a flow chart saying step 1, do this, step 2, do that, and go down the thing. That's one thing. So the first thing you got to do is you have to systemize it. Then once you systemize it, you go, what could we automate? What could I put in as technology? Can I automate anything in here? Systemize it, automate it. Last thing you do is you have to outsource it. Now, outsourcing could be to a software or technology. It could be to a in-house employee, or it could be to a virtual assistant, right? We were very good with virtual assistants when I had my company. 60% of my company was being run out of Mexico with virtual assistants, and we had over 1,000 properties.
Wow.
So for anyone who says they can't do it, they don't understand the word outsourcing. I will tell you that right now. So let me just throw that out there. So with that being said, and I help, there's a couple of big Canadian investors that you guys probably know that I help them as well. Great group of people. But when it comes to taking your day, right? If you want to lose weight, you start tracking your meals. You want to figure out where your money's going, start getting on a budget and writing down where your money goes. You want to see where your time goes, do a time study. So when I coach people, one of the first things I make them do is they have to do a time study every day of documenting their day for 2 weeks. Then they got to send it to me. Every day they got to screenshot it. They got to send it to me. By the end of week 1, we have clearly identified where they are wasting time on low-level, low-income tasks. They're not being the CEO. They're being the operator. And when you're being the operator, you're wasting time. So I'll give you an example. A 5-minute phone call, simple phone call, is equaled to 23 minutes of lost productivity. So as an investor doing deals, dealing with stuff, you get minimum of 10 calls a day, just bullshit stuff. Well, that's 230 minutes on average of lost time. Being a reactive person, that's when you go, man, I don't know what I did today, but I was busy doing nothing except putting out fires. Because you're being reactive, because you're not controlling your day. Successful people that truly run a business are not reactive. They are proactive. And you have to learn how to outsource and delegate and leverage other people, other systems, other knowledge, and not use your own.
Yeah, totally. And as you're saying that, it actually makes me realize, like with the real estate effect, we also organize events. And I know that in the past, I've spent way too much time trying to do it by myself. And at some point, I literally stopped and looked at myself and like, you're ridiculous, Excel. Look at the time you spend doing this. It's making no money. Yeah, you get 100 people together and everyone has a good time, but it's a waste of your time organizing it. And so now I put someone in charge of it and it's starting to run a little bit better. And that's just one example. And the time audit is quite brutal. It's a brutal exercise.
It is. It is because you know what? Because it's you're opening up the wound and putting a flashlight on it to see how bad it's infected. And you're like, whoa, I didn't think it was that bad. And so when you look at people, and look, I coach people that have $50 million businesses and they do it and they're like, holy shit. Like, I didn't realize this was that. Like, I didn't realize I was so unproductive. And again, when you talk to people like, what do you do with your day? I'm like, oh, I'm busy. I'm like, really? Let's see how busy. And they're doing like 4 hours of actual work in a 12-hour day. And they're like, I had no idea. If I say, hey, stop doing stupid shit, that's not a good use of your time, you would argue the point. But when you write it down and have to actually send it to me, that now you're accountable, different story. And so that's just what I have learned. It's been a very interesting model doing it that way. But again, if you want to start running a business, you have to treat it like a business. So going back to your original question, you've got to make sure that you are running it like a business because it is one.
Yeah. And now moving on to the scaling process. Okay, you have a couple of units and then you're like, okay, you set a goal and you're like, I want to buy 30 doors this year. I want to buy $3 million worth and so on and so forth. Even that in terms of the prospecting, the deal finding, the vetting, due diligence, the packaging, financing and closing, even that can be systematized. And a lot of people forget that. And they always think that they have to be in the middle of it. They have to be in the middle of everything, which really they don't. And so in your experience and being able to acquire so many properties in such a short amount of time over the years, like on the deal packet finding and packaging, how were you able to structure it so that you didn't have to do everything yourself?
Well, it all comes down to actually realizing that we are not as important as we think we are. We're not as smart as we think we are, and we're not as important. The reality is other people could do what we do. Probably 85% of the things I do could be done by somebody else. You met me. What the first thing I do? I introduced you to my assistant. She took care of it. She handled it. Could I have done it? Yes. Is that the best use of my time? No. I do 4 podcast shows a day with people. So where do I spend my time? Right. So what if you broke down, let's say, for example, let me back up a little bit. Let me just take 1 or 2 steps back for what you said, because I think it's important. You had said like, okay, $3 million or 30 units. I think people make a mistake by putting a number. I'll back up. When you have a goal, right? You may say, when I say, what's your goal? And they go, $50 million. I'm like, okay, why? I don't know. It just sounds good. I'm like, well, that's fucking stupid. So give me a reason. Right. And so what happens is what we do when we're trying to create a goal. I get, we want to, shoot for the moon, hang with the stars, all this stuff we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel good. But what happens is when we fail to achieve goals day after day, year after year, it starts beating you down. And you start questioning whether you could do it. Yeah. That's the first thing. Second thing is, okay, you say I want $50 million. And I go, okay, what does $50 million give you? It gives me freedom to do what I want, right? Because that's what a lot of people that I talk to, their thought is that they want freedom. And I go, okay, freedom's that important to you? Yes. Okay, why don't you sell all your stuff today? Go live in the park and you'll have all the freedom you want. But you know what you won't have? Is you won't like the memories that freedom gives you. So are you buying freedom or are you buying memories? I venture to say you're buying memories. Maybe it's dinner on the Mediterranean in Greece with your family. Maybe it's safari. So it's not freedom. It's a lie. It's the memories. The freedom gives you ability to have the memories. The money gives you the ability to have the freedom. So work it backwards. So we stop short by thinking money is giving us freedom, but that's a lie because we could have freedom tomorrow. I mean, you could live wherever you want for free. So the first challenge people have is they don't have a realistic goal that is actually the reason that they want to do this. Again, my opinion, I could be way off, but
no, it's really interesting actually, because you're right. Like if you don't set a number, okay, let's stay on your $50 million example. People say, well, I want 50 million in assets because I know I'll get so much cash flow and that allows me to live the lifestyle that I'd like. And that to me is a fair reasoning. But as you said, it's what you do with it. It's what you do with the time you're going to get back, right? And that's how you create the memories. So are you saying like people should set goals in terms of memories?
Yeah. You should have a memory board. So, okay. So I'll give you an example. So this is a situation where people, look, I get you want to have this big, bold, badass number that just like, whoa, that's amazing, right? Everybody wants that stepping on stage with the cape on, look how bad I am moment, right? So I was speaking at I was a keynote at a big conference in Orlando this week, and it was a property management convention. And I was sitting at lunch, and this person comes up and he's talking to me, and he's like, we want to grow our company and we want to scale it. And I'm like, okay. I go, well, what's the goal? And he's like, we want to sell it for $100 million. I'm like, okay. I go, do you know what multiple businesses sell in this industry for? He's like, I don't even know what multiple is. I'm like, well, it's the amount of revenue and they multiply it and that's what it's worth. He's like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, normally it's about 1.7 to maybe 1.8 multiple. Said, so basically you have to have a $50 million business. I said, when do you own this $50 million business? He's like, 5 years. I said, 5 years is not a date. I need a date. And he's like, July. And I'm like, that's still not a date. I need a date. Give me a freaking date. Right. So he's like, July 1st, 27. Okay. Now we have a date, $50 million. And then I go, so that means essentially you need to grow about $10 million a year. Right. He's like, yeah. So, okay, you're going to grow $10 million a year. That means roughly you got to grow about $830,000 a month in revenue. I'm like, okay. And so I'm backing this out for him, and you could see his expression changing. Yeah. I said, so that means basically in property management numbers, I backed it down. I'm like, you need to grow 500 properties a month, every month. And I said, so tell me, what is your marketing budget to get you? If you have 500 doors, that means you probably need to talk to about 2,000 potentials to squeeze 500 actual clients. And then what is your operations to actually digest 500 doors? Because next month you're bringing another 500. Now, most management companies through the cycle of their entire life of 20 years only grow to 250 to 300 doors, but you're going to grow 500 doors a month. And he's like, and you could see he's looking at it. And I said, listen, I'm not saying you can't do it, but I'm like, if month one, you get 2 doors and you need to get 500, at what point do people look at you and go, you're not a leader? And they stop believing in you. And now you've lost faith. Yeah. And that dream was an illusion. So I'm not saying don't dream high. So going back to what people do is they don't put a quantifiable, like I want to own 300 million in real estate. Okay, let's back it out. So what I suggest people do to achieve their goals is start with the end. Like, let's say, what does your life look like in 20 years? I'll give you a quick example. And hopefully this will answer a lot of questions that people are thinking right now. That I'm not crazy. I actually have a plan with what I'm saying. So I tell people, let's just keep it simple, right? Let's say we want to own 20 properties in 20 years, and it's going to give us $20,000 a month. 20, 20, 20. Just keep it simple, right? Some people say that's too stupid. That's too low. I don't care. Let's just use it for math. So if you're going to own 20 properties in 20 years, giving you $20,000 a month, that means that you have to have each property giving you roughly $1,000 a month. Very simple math, right? Yeah. Now, that means in 10 years, you need to have found all your properties so that the secondary 10 years, they're going to be paid off. So you're going to do that snowball effect, right? Again, I know there's many, many different ways to do it. I don't want the smarty pants getting on here telling me that I could own a finance. I get all that. I'm just keeping this simple. So that means for the first 10 years, you need to buy 20 properties, which means you need to buy 2 properties a year, which means you need to close on one every 6 months, which means you basically need to find one every 3 months. So how much money do you have to buy a property and close on one every 6 months? Do you have the money to do that? Do you have the money to rehab it? Do you have the holding money? Start backing it out. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but that's part of the strategy. So if you come to me and say, hey, Steve, I found this deal. What do you think? And I look at it and it's going to make you $500 a month. I'm going to go, well, that's not part of the goal. It's not going to get you to the goal. So either we have to change the goal or we have to change the strategy. So whenever people are looking at a deal, they don't understand, does this get me to the goal of, let's say, 20, 20, 20? If it doesn't get you to the goal, well, you got 2 choices. You either change the goal or you change the strategy. maybe, and again, I coach a lot from Bigger Pockets, a lot of people and stuff, and they'll say, well, I can't get these $1,000 properties in San Francisco, right? That doesn't exist because I got to spend money and I'm negative geared and all that. Okay. Well, then you have another option. Option one is change your strategy, meaning change your market to where does that exist?
Yeah.
Does it even exist? Or change the goal, right? Maybe the goal is going to be not cash flow. Maybe it's going to be appreciation. But again, people just blindly buy a deal, or they look at this and they don't understand, is this actually a linkage to get me to the end goal? And so if you start with the end and work it backwards, the strategy is more clear once you know where you're going, just like getting in your car.
Absolutely. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I like your approach. And I know I'm going to have to, just with what you said, I'm going to have a little bit of thinking to do, because you've raised some really good points that I need to clarify. And I like that you start with the end to really see, like, does everything you do actually bring you closer to this goal? Because I know in some ways I started in real estate and I was like, oh, all I need to do is like find good deals. And well, what's the definition of a good deal? People have different definitions, number one. But number two is like, it's not, as Brandon Turner said, like, you can go broke buying good deals. And that's crazy when you think about it, but it's so true. And so, oh, wow,
Yeah.
Steve.
And something else I'll give you, because you said you're married. I think you said, I think you did.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
If not, I don't want to make this an awkward conversation for you. So one of the things I would suggest you do, and for your listeners do this, and I always do this with coaching clients, is even if your spouse is not involved in real estate, it doesn't matter. You are running a business and that business needs a board of directors. I recommend that you and your wife set up a monthly board of directors meeting. Okay. Now, if you have a business partner, this is even more important, if not mandatory, that you and the business partner and the spouses get together for this monthly board meeting. What do you talk about? Financials, P&L statement, balance sheets, forecasting, goals, on track, off track, where are we at? It's not a bitch session. It's not a complaining. It's an upper level conversation with the board of directors to keep the spouses in the loop so that they at least understand what's going on. And if they have questions, that is when they ask it. So I coach a lot of husband and wives, and they're like, oh man, my wife is really not digging what I'm doing. So I have what's called an alignment meeting, where I basically kind of set the tone with them of how we're going to do this. And I tell them, each of you guys get a notebook. Okay. So when you get this notebook, write on it, board of directors, BOD. So whenever you have a question or you have a concern, do not talk about it over dinner. Do not start crossing those lines, right? Because once you blur them, it stops becoming a business and it becomes a everyday everything. Some people are proud of that. They're like, oh, we talk about it all the time. I'm like, that's stupid. Like, live your life, own your business. There's a difference, right? Don't let your business bleed into your life. Now, anytime she has a question, you have a question, there's a bitch, there's a problem, whatever, write it in the book. Because what I have found is many times it's an emotional question that really was just a knee-jerk question that they were asking, and it caused all these conversations, and it was really for nothing. It was
unnecessary. Yeah.
It was unnecessary. So what did you do? You wasted a lot of time over nothing. Write it in the book. We'll discuss it at the board of directors, and you have to agree that that's the trigger. If I say, write it in the book and we'll discuss it at the meeting, that should be your trigger to shut up. Okay, got it. I got it. That's my bingo word. I'm good. Then when you have the meeting, you pull it out and say, okay, what do you want to discuss? Normally, if you had 10 things on the list, 7 of them are like, yeah, no big deal. That was just me. I was just curious. But think of how much time you saved and arguments. Yeah. And it's the time that, especially if you have business partners, that's the time that the spouses can ask questions. And because 70% of all business partners end in lawsuit or dissolution, not because the two people didn't get along, because the spouses were unclear as to the destination and the direction of the model of the business.
Wow, that's really interesting. You're absolutely right. And it makes me think on one of the properties that we're doing now. We brought in a partner, someone we know, we went to school together, we're friends and stuff, but I think I need to formalize the reporting and the meetings. And as you said, once a month. Would you recommend doing it over dinner, or it's literally a sit down dinner board meeting?
It's a board meeting. Do not do it at your house. Find a remote place. I don't even really recommend dinner at first. I recommend you do the business first, and then you can have dinner and drinks after. But the first is all business. I would recommend you bring all the P&L statements. You bring the financials. Everybody gets a copy. I mean, it is a formal business meeting, and you want to treat it that way. Don't talk about anything else. Like, okay, we're going to start. Somebody has to take notes with action items. So if it's like, hey, we got to find out about getting our prices down on this. Well, that's not when you start having the conversation. Let me look it up. It's like, you know what? I'll take that action item on the next board of directors meeting. I'll let you know where we're at. So that's when you have those meetings about that. It's very, very important. Now, I will tell you, you mentioned partnerships. So partnerships obviously are, a lot of people like partners, but again, they end up ending badly. Some of the things you got to do. Do I have enough time to
go.
So one of the things I recommend when it comes to partnerships is the first thing you have to do is you have to have an expectation meeting. Now, this should also be the same with your spouse, just so you know, even if she's not a partner, but she should be in these meetings, right? Because she is a stockholder in your company, right? So you have these expectation meeting with your partner. Okay. I recommend, and again, this may be overboard, but I recommend creating an organization chart for this business. Okay, what is your role, John? Okay, what is your role? This is my role. So we all know what our roles are. Do we all agree this is what we're doing in the business? Yes. Okay, what is your expectation of time commitment? Well, I think I'm going to spend about 2 hours a month. Shit, I thought you were going to spend out 10 hours a day. I'm not doing that. Clear the conversation before it happens, right? Next thing, okay, what is your exit time frame? Well, I want to exit this deal in 6 months. Oh, I thought this was a 10-year play. No. Okay. So you have to figure out expectations of exiting. Okay. Then who's putting the money in? This guy's putting the money in and he's just a check. He's writing a check. That's cool. He's not expected to do anything, but he has to have that checkbook ready. So is there going to be a cash call? Does he have more funds to put into the deal? If you do a cash call and one of the partners doesn't have money, how do you handle it? Should be written into the operating agreement. What happens if everyone needs to put in $10,000 because the roof just blew off and you don't have $10,000? It should be in the agreement before you get into business with each other. And the most important thing, it's the most uncomfortable thing, but it is the most important thing. What if you and your business partner get a divorce? Halfway through, you're like, you know what? I effing hate this guy. I can't work with him. We need to separate. Well, you can't just separate when you own a piece of property. So what is the buyout? Can I buy you out? Can you buy me out? How do we dissolve the relationship? And I get a lot of people, they'll be like, oh man, we're best friends in high school. I'm like, that is exactly why you have the conversation now. Because if you don't have it now, when things are calm, before the deal ever happened, how do you think it's going to go down in the heat of battle when there's money at stake, assets, emotions? You think it's going to go better or worse than having a calm conversation? So in order to save the friendship, the relationship, the partnership, you have to have the meeting. Hey, look, if this doesn't work, we need to figure out how to split this, separate, and do it, professionally. And I always tell people, man, you've got to have that divorce conversation.
Yeah. And in a situation like that, wouldn't you just then recommend to sell the asset and then split?
Well, you could, but what if you can't sell it? What if the market turns? What if you're in the middle of a major rehab? What if, you know what I mean? Like, what if the guy loses his job and you've got to cover the note and it's vacant? You don't always just sell the property in the best of times, right? Sometimes it's because shit's hitting the fan and there's money needed. And this person's like, I don't have the money. Like I had a partnership, or not a partnership. I was coaching a partnership. And one of the guys was like, they had a cash call, it was like $10,000 each to put in for a roof on a property. And one guy was married and the other guy, when they started the partnership, was single, and then he got married, right? So now they're both married. And, it's going on for a couple of years or whatever. And the guy says, hey man, we got to put 10 grand each on this roof. And the guy's like, oh man, he's like, my wife will freaking kill me. He's like, I can't do it, man. He's like, I just can't. Like, I will get divorced if the new wife, she doesn't like real estate. She's not really in on this. I can't do it. Right. So he's like, okay, well, I guess so they asked me, he's like, what should I do? I said, well, do you have a clause in there? He's like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, you've got an option. You could either tack it on, you buy it, you tack it on, and then you get paid first after it sells with interest. I said, you can divest his interest in the partnership. So he is $10,000 less of an owner. You have that ownership. So and I gave him some other ideas that we could do. So he decided to go with the easy route of just tacking it on at the end. So 2 weeks later, his buddy drives up in a brand new car. And he's like, what the hell, man? I thought you didn't have the money. He goes, oh, I didn't say I didn't have the money. I just said I couldn't do it. Well, you can imagine how the relationship went from there, right?
Yeah.
So, the whole thing exploded. And I'm like, this is why you have to have the conversation up front. Because it's that is a realistic situation that could happen to anybody.
Yeah. And that's a really, really good example.
Yeah. And normally it's because of lack of communication, right? It's the things we don't want to talk about. We all, when we get into real estate, we always want to talk about good things, how much money we're going to make. There is a dark side to every day. There is a dark side to real estate. I've been in the dark side, and everybody thinks that it's going to be summer forever. And they're shocked when winter comes, but winter is coming. There will be tough times. And if you're not prepared for it, guess what happens? You have a very horrible existence in the next couple of years with stuff going wrong because you didn't prepare for winter. And that's what happens.
Yeah. That's some very good advice you're sharing there. Thank you so much, Steve. Steven, it's really, really appreciated. I know a lot of things you said will trigger a number of conversations in households, in people's heads about how to approach and how to set up partnerships and the way they've handled their business so far. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Anything I can do to help. Like I said, this is all about, one thing I've learned, like I said, we don't have a rule book, number one, that doesn't exist. And I think real estate, and especially investors and entrepreneurs, we are a very small group of people collectively. When you look at us worldwide, there's not many of us. So if we can help each other be better, why wouldn't we? That's what I don't understand. Bigger Pockets does a great job of that. There's a lot of organizations. I'm friends with, you mentioned Brandon Turner and all these other guys. I'm good friends with a lot of them, and they're all of an abundance mindset. Nobody hoards their information. We talk about it. We discuss it. I go to masterminds personally with them, and, we all have the same mindset. So there's a common theme between people like us.
Yeah. And it's so important to surround yourself with quality people like that you can always ask a question, and that are just a little bit further than you are in the spiral of development and in the business growth. Like, hey, what did you do? How did you handle that? And enhance also, and that's also a springboard. Like you said, you coach and you have a mastermind. Do you want to tell us about it? I mean, some people listening could be interested.
Yeah. So I've got several things that I do, and they can, if they want to go on my website, steverozenberg.com, they can see it there. But every Monday I do a think tank mastermind, and the think tank mastermind is I bring on some of the best people in the industry. A lot of the Bigger Pockets people that of, very big names that are good friends of mine, they'll come on, and it's just live Q&A. They get to talk, they get to communicate, they get to hang out, they get to know them. They do deals. A lot of people do deals amongst each other. I bring on some top level people, and then I talk a lot about mindset, right? Because a lot of people are trying to figure this out. So that is a mastermind that I do. It's every week, and I, record it on Zoom, and then they can get it, but they can engage, ask me questions, ask the speaker questions. I just had my buddy Indar Lang, who's one of the biggest flippers and wholesalers in Hawaii. He was on. I get, Brandon, a lot of people. So that's that. I also do a 3-day deep dive mastermind. So this is where people actually come out to Houston, Texas, and they do a 3-day deep dive into them. And then they get 1 year of unlimited access to me. So they get to talk to me, converse with me, everything, whenever they want, unlimited. And then I also have a video course. So I have an education video platform on a platform called Lightspeed, same as Grant Cardone, Tony Robbins, all that. And it's all about how to go from 0 to 20 properties to syndication from the mental side. So it's all about who do you have to become mentally to become that person that owns that properties. And so who you have to hire, who you have to fire, who you have to be around. And then it goes through all the definitions and everything that goes along with owning real estate. So basically take someone from 0 up to 0 to 1, 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 and beyond. Because as you grow, you are becoming a different person. Otherwise you will stop growing. So you can't be the same person that owned one property that now owns 20 or 30. I mean, you said before you own 20 plus properties. I'm sure you think differently than you did on property one, right? Yeah. You have a different take. You have a different action items. Things that scared you before don't scare you now. you have evolved. And so what I do is I teach people how to do that.
Okay. And the best way to find out more about you, as you said, on the website?
Yeah. If you go to my website, it's steverozenberg.com. So it's ROZENBERG. There you can find all the information. Also, I'm on every social media platform that you can imagine. I'm sure if you look me up, you'll find me. And I've got a podcast show. It's called High Stakes with Steve Rozenberg. I bring on some, that's more business. So I bring on some very, very high level business people to talk about the business of themselves, right? Why do they do what they do? I get like FBI profilers, Iron Cowboy, Lee Labrada, pro bodybuilder. I get a lot of people that I just want to hear like what drives them to be successful in their life. So it's a really good podcast show. It just started about a month or two ago, but it's getting a lot of traction. All
right. Well, congratulations. I'll be sure to check it out. Thank you so much for taking the time today. It's really, really, really appreciated. I know it will be listened and liked and shared, and hopefully will affect as many people as possible. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And for everyone listening, thanks for staying until the end. I know my voice is completely broken. I really apologize for that. And we'll talk to you next week. And in the meantime, keep doing your market research and make some offers. Thank you.